So I'll start with a new poem, and then I'll read some from the book, and then I'll end with some other new poems. Poem with blunt instrument. I want to take a blunt instrument to the stalk of loneliness, pulp the stem of its scentless flower. What is the power that rips the tea from terror, leaving error only, feeble error? Or strikes figure from ground from under the staggering figure, as if blinded, drunk, as if on the muddled air the pitched and stammered disorder of the world. What is the power that pries the wasp from the fig from the dense green Eden of its arbor, the order that bore it, sucks it down, black and whole? So I tend to write in series, and these series tend to accrue sometimes over years. And I'll start with poems from the series called Listening Machine. I know who you are, says the listening machine. Tell me what I am. Each day opens fire on the day before, the blaze of sunlight, and the world subsides. I know you. I've known you for so long. From the time when women wore gloves up to the elbow, men wore hats squarely on their heads. From the time before that when no one wore any clothes at all, when the world furled open like a waking eye. Tell me what I was. The mind is physical, says the listening machine. The machine is physical. The wet physical wind bends the reeds of the physical field. We are two bodies thinking together this thought, the breathing body of this thought. Call it the control tower beaming through the dark, the shadow with opposable thumbs thrown in the resinous glow of the painted cave. Call it the source, an idea, the idea that keeps tenaciously persisting, making unreasonable demands. Feel, says the listening machine, not the surface of sound, but its undertow, the roar below the roar of the surf, the sea inside the mind curling its many hands around sun-darkened bodies, the darkened heart, the point of all this, whether dreamt or said aloud in dreams. I don't want to say words the meanings of which empty themselves are themselves emptied in a vortex of echoes. In the caverns of words we drew horned antelopes and hunters, we drew their enormous penises and long spears, we drew the outlines of small hands, pointed breasts, fat-bellied women, and sang about the sexual machine, at rest now, glistening with the milk of its efforts and its red, radiant coil. I wrestled with an abstract geometry. What is an angel? For a name to stitch to the breast of my fatigues to stick to my forehead's opaque tar. Wrestled for the press of its celestial digits into the indistinct, featureless moon of my skull. If there is no one to name you, name yourself, says the listening machine. The first song I ever heard, says the listening machine, was disguised as a love song, but wasn't. It raked through me, plucked the wires of my heart with the hand of its sad, sooty, itinerant eros, and estranged me from myself. There was pleasure in it. The straining music, the mind forcing its lyric noise through the narrow channels, the holes of the body that maintains it. On point, says the listening machine. We turn around and around and around on the pointed toe of this thought, the pointed bloody toe inside its blunt-nosed rosy satin shoe. How long? How many revolutions? What heat is generated by this centrifugal spin? Who is the maître de ballet? Who tends the wounded? How long before the vertigo sets in? I imagined I was talking to you, says the listening machine. How is the end determined? And were we walking? And how far along the bluff, along the poem of the road which is itself a road? And where did we begin along the poem road to conspire toward an end? It's not like I want to spend my nights taping songs off of the radio again. I only want to go a little crazy. I want to make do with fewer words. And anyway, how many do I need? The struggle, says the listening machine, is staying alive not only out of habit. Are you writing this down? To lose a sense from the sensorium in its entirety, to lose all the words of all the world in their entirety, to lull one's tongue in that aphasic fog. To lose the long-held habits of the body incrementally or all at once. Will we be standing there? Will it be pandemonium, all that raucous and difficult music? But difficult music can be such an uneasy delight. Oh, last of the species, says the listening machine, how it lusts for its own kind, listless with grief, the shape of it, skeletal, wet with the saline of its sweat and tears, these hobbled curves, these knots and knobs of its singular spine. O shipwrecked alien, O last in line. Admit the ghost, says the listening machine. Let the visitor into the Baroque interior, down the dark corridor to your paradox of rooms. Make space at the table, the cradle, the bed. In the dream, there is always another room where none had been, a warren of undiscovered rooms in the once familiar house, long sealed against the drafts, the cold, unsettling leakage of the world, arranging itself, rearranging itself, shifting curiously or terribly as the many-chambered heart. I wanted, says the listening machine, for nothing. Are you a wanted or unwanted guest in the great house of this satedness, in this zoological park of ruminating beasts grown tame and timid, huddled flank to flank? Are you wanted or unwanted, obscure and wanton moon, multiplied and quivering in the reflecting pools, winking obscenely as you wane? We stood together, wine-warmed, in the rectory gardens. Peacocks screamed, dusk slurred into night in a transitional season. We didn't hold time to its particulars. Matches scraped, flared their modest incandescence. I know it is coming, you said, waving toward the sky with the dancing point of your cigarette's ember. I feel I am, walking into a storming rain of meteors. And the souls of those other poets are falling, falling. They plummet as long-tailed comets through black space. When will a meteor fall on me? No one is spared, no solace. Look, there it is, whipping its tail with the maniacal intent of a spermatozoa. You laughed, coughed, fell quiet. And I'll read a few poems from a series of 10 epistolary poems called Dear Jenny. Dear Jenny, I want to go slower. I want to be a pedestrian, kill the engine, abandon the vehicle. It stalls and sputters and goes still, this machine, and still I am driving. I drive through the toll plaza, over the bridge, through the Palisades, down the coastal highway. I am driving toward the island, toward the sea and the seaside hotel on the island. The resort lights flicker, the waves are waving, I am arriving, the festive flags flutter up and fall. I let the motor idle, I walk toward the hotel, I ring the little bell, but the hotel by the sea is empty. The crab shacks are empty, the boardwalk and the carnival rides creak in the empty wind. I circle the carousel, I stroke the lacquered muzzles of the ponies, I trace their horsey teeth with my hand, then their painted eyes. And the air seems slower to me, and the heave of the tide seems slower to me, and I feel myself slowly swimming against the steady progress of the sea, and the sea is empty of tumult, empty even of myself. It is moving and not moving. I am moving my arms and my legs. I am clutching the reins. I am driving toward the sea and away from it. I am swimming up the down escalator. I'm confused, Jenny. Were there camels on the carousel? Were there saddled goats grazing in the dune grass? And were you there in the car waiting with the windows down, talking on your phone? I couldn't make it out what you were saying over the radio. And that song I can't get out of my head now, or was it the voice on the radio and not your voice that I heard? The escalator was descending into the underground mall. It was closing time. There was no one there. The shoppers had folded their umbrellas, gathered their things, and dispersed over the dunes long ago. I'm not the poet here, but it's a feeling I'm trying to get at, the escalator and the sea and you, Jenny. I forgot you, and then I remembered everything just how it was, and then I forgot. The feeling, do you know it? You can describe it better than me. Dear Jenny, I'm not what I was. I no longer trust myself to tell it like it really is. I weep for no good reason. I weep at the roundness of the moon. I weep at the mere mention of violins. I weep at the drabness of the sparrows in the park, at the smallness of the sparrows, at the sparseness of the grass. I weep in the ambassador's limousine. I weep in the elevator, and I weep into my food. The words in melancholy songs again tug at my heart. The national anthems of foreign countries make me weep. I weep for the despots. I think that even despots have moments of tenderness. Even the despots whose headless statues swing by the feet from ropes in the public squares of decimated cities, even they sometimes look at their little children asleep in their gilded cribs with tenderness. Even they sometimes turn to their wives at night with perfect tenderness. I have no wife, Jenny. I weep at that. Who you turn to at night matters more than you know. Jenny, now that the words in melancholy songs again tug at my heart is not the same. Dear Jenny, I can't go to sleep and I can't wake up. There are voices crowding the soapbox, but there is no one there. I have thoughts in my head, but they are not my thoughts. Things keep happening. I left the windows open, but now they are closed. What do windows keep in? What do they keep out? The world, people from falling out into the world? And all the people in the old photo albums, do they still exist? They've gathered to watch the flying machines being launched into the air, dressed in gauzy summer white. They're gesturing, raising their arms, squinting against the sun's bright haze. Nothing happens. They are stuck. The photograph is still. I rearrange the world outside myself, inside my mind. Jenny, how do I remain still in gestures of wonder? There are zeppelins crowding the skyways. There are thoughts that float like flocks of zeppelins. Zeppelins shaped like giant thought bubbles. Sometimes they collide and burn up in a fiery blaze. I don't recognize them as mine. And I also have a series in this book of New Year's poems, New Year's Day. And I wrote them over a series of years at moments of transition, either literally around the new year or around one life chapter closing and another one not yet begun or just about to begin. New Year's Day. It isn't how it looks, but how it feels. I just sit there opening my mind to my mind. And all the soldiers of the garden, the frogs and snakes, and all the foot soldiers in the garden composing letters under the stars. The most idle days are the ones in which I most occupy myself. I occupy myself with all that exists. I don't remember the pleasant sensation of a hand on my breast. The soldiers in the garden strum their guitars. I can't contain myself any longer. I wanted very badly to feel, very badly to feel. I don't remember the pleasant sensation at all. I reached for words and spinster's spectacles appeared on the shelf of the airport bookstore. I imagine a black hole at the far end of the airport corridor, people running breathless toward the departure gate on New Year's Eve. There must be a way to say it. The long goodbye can't speak of itself. I don't remember what I ate a year ago today. A year ago today in Los Angeles, the cat died. I wanted very badly to be, if only briefly, the rude sensation, messy and guttural. We stood together in the middle of the Brooklyn Bridge, but that was all. The nor'easter blew the black ice in from the lakes. It was the start of a long winter. I'm certain there is consequence in the afterlife. It happened in Buffalo without anything happening at all. At that moment, I entered him with my mind. Some boundary for a brief flash disappeared. To the untrained eye, it's as if nothing had, in actuality, occurred. The wind blew the postcard out of my hands and into the Niagara River. The falls were invisible in the rain and heavy mist. I couldn't see them, though my blouse and face were wet. I admit I've made some mistakes. You can close and open your mind as easily as blinking your eyes. Wanting to be elsewhere, I am elsewhere. Wanting to be here, I find my way back through the garden, though the garden has grown thick with weeds. I will write an opera called The Opera Student. I know the story. I know that it ends badly. The opera student learns to die incrementally, yet it may be possible to be sung back to life. Yes, it may be entirely possible to be sung back to life. In the afterlife, the souls of lovers can be united. Writing these words, it is no longer entirely clear what I might be. This morning I watched the slow destruction of the world, the wind dancing the storm clouds across the sky. It was impossible to decide what to take and what to leave behind. Am I fighting for my life in a comfortable bed? The skies are clammy and the wind smells of sweat. And all the while, people going about their business, conducting normal daily lives. So I sit in the garden, opening my mind to my mind. The wind slow dancing the storm clouds across the sky. All that exists is the real that unwinds in the mind of the wind. There is the sensation I can't remember at all, the weight of his hand. He turned to me with all the force of his terrible love. It crashed down, and I spun like a top across the floor of the room. I spun into the garden, and my feet sank into the mud. It had either just stopped raining or the rain had just begun. In any case, in this opera, something started and something also stopped. He turned to me with all the force of his terrible face. He gave me a watch with a very large face from the counterfeiters in Chinatown. I didn't want to hold it to my ear. I spun like a top across the floor of the departure lounge. I spun like a planet spinning amid the stars. It is important to walk into the black hole at the end of the airport corridor when your name is called. It is important to be able to step in or out of the room you are in. I know people who can only lean out of windows, waving or shielding their eyes from the sun and wind, sometimes the moon. The moon last night had a very large face. I have never shared a hotel room with love, someone said as we waited to board the airport train. I have never shared a hotel room at all, said someone else. It is important to have a key to the room you are in. That is what the postcard said. You can't just sit there bending words to your will, said the frogs and the snakes. It's like flogging a Pegasus grazing a lyrical hill in a lyrical field, the soldiers said. I leave the world without leaving the world, said the wind. The animal that can say I said, where do you go when you go away? The world is not the world, the soldier and the opera student sing out of the window of the airport hotel. I want to open the door to the room of my mind. I want to be sung back to life, says the mythical beast. No one can be opened by a skeleton key. And I'll end tonight by reading from a series that I'm working on now called Enter Ghost, stage direction from Hamlet. Enter Ghost. Enter occupying army of ghosts. Troops on the march, thrumming convoys on the marsh, enter the drumming heart. Enter the heave and hoe and heave of migrant massing clouds. The teeming host of fat and frantic moths obscuring the white orb of the sun. If the sun is a storm, I will stand at the gate with knock-knock jokes and riddles. What leaves without leaving, never having left, returns, and knocks and knocks and knocks its fist against a hot pursuit. If the sun is a storm of gases and moth dust and flame, then the stutter and spray of fire in the sky is a body dispersing, its dust light. Stand too close, and the face of the sun fractures and multiplies, shatters and swims. Keep your body there in this present diction, this subtle body, the words askew from what the impulse that they press to represent. Enter ghost, imperious, jangling the keys to the kingdom of inertia, stupor, the envoy of the old, the vanished world, the dimming day. And the sun cuts its arc, the low crescent of its scythe, bisecting body from mind, mind from the heat of the body's life and its insistence, as basic as the insects to crawl or fly toward the singeing primacy of the light. The intact body, the dispersed mind. Enter ghost, shuffling, unsettling the dust from the surface of things. I would recognize it by its voice, its whistle, its wheeze, by its favorite vice, the mossy sillage of its scent, by the singular thump, tap, tap, thump of its gait. Would it know me in kind? By the same. Enter now as a swimmer enters, wading into the great chrome undulation of the late-day ocean. Its boundless thought, the ashen, ruminative sky, the heavy sun, both scarlet and obscure. It melts, reconstitutes, drags out its swell and wane, snags at the roughening chop, the weedy waves, and finally fades. And in love, where do the ghosts go? Do we make space in ourselves for the ghosts of the other? Do they enter us at first sight? Do they hover? Are they in our bodies in the way that we kiss, touch, make love, fuck, in the way we flinch, shrink, grow hard-eyed, go blank? Are the ghosts the ones opening our mouths, holding our tongues, pulling the strings, jerking us forward, back, awake in the middle of the night? Okay, I will receive your ghosts. My ghosts have been instructed of the proper protocols. They are polishing the silver, beating the rugs, airing the linen, pinning roses to their boutonnieres, rolling up their flounced and fluttering and empty sleeves. Enter revisers of maps, the vanquishers and vanishers of nations, the last of the natives, tenacious linguists of the dead and dying languages. Enter the scribes, the typists, the data entrists, their lists of feast days and fast days. Enter the place name of displaced persons, the ship manifests, the inconstant consonants and vowels lost in transliteration. Enter the retouchers, the touch and touch and touch deep into the private life of identifying markers, touching out the eyes with gouges of rectangular black. Enter revisionists, the preoccupied and unreliable narrators of their own dreams. Enter the red hoods of the grand inquisitors, the little reds, the riders. Enter the winders of clocks, the professional rewinders, and the amateur pornographers, ravelers of spools of magnetized tape. Enter the creamy, lingering musk of ghosting lovers, the nostalgic apologists, atrocity deniers, the long-winded bores. Enter the wind, or the wind whistling loose the clinging leaves in a copse of trees, into which enter stampeding boars, wild, brilliant-eyed, rooting with their tusked snouts in the black loam of a thought. Enter a thought, scraping its cuneiform against the scrub of time. Enter ancestral animal, or the last animal in captivity, the last replacement animal. Enter your last verified, last unverified address, your thumbprint's whorl, your flecked iris, your retina scan. Enter your spit, your sample, your animal scat. Enter your functional extinction. Enter the face of the animal missing its face. And I'll end with this poem. Enter ghost into the anthem's chorus, your vacant and aching counterpoint. The vowels of its voiceless known, what is known but not thought, felt but not formed to thought. Enter as agitated air, as flustered moths, as a sound shaped in the aperture of a gaping mouth. Enter apparitions of imperiled empire, no heir apparent, apportioned and partitioned, breathless and late, as the present enters and re-enters and re-enters the present tense. Thank you so much.
I decided to start with an early poem called Genghis Chan, Private Eye. And you'll see why, because I'll end from reading a new manuscript I'm working on called Genghis Chan on Drums. Genghis Chan, Private Eye 1. I was floating through a cross-section with my dusty wine glass when she entered, a shivering bundle of shredded starlight. You don't need words to tell a story. A gesture will do. These days, we're all parasites looking for a body to cling to. I'm nothing more than riffraff splendor drifting past the runway. I always keep a supply of lamprey lipstick around, just in case. She laughed, a slashed melody of small shrugs. It had been raining in her left eye. She began, a cloud or story broken in 2, maybe 4 places, wooden eyelids and a scarf of human hair. She paused. I offer you dervish bleakness and glistening sediment. It was late, and we were getting jammed in deep. I was on the other side, staring at the snow-covered moon pasted above the park. A foul lump started making promises in my voice. Genghis Chan, Private Eye 3. We surfed out of the alley, the stories our parents told us trailing behind like angry yellow toads. You spoke first. One of my ancestral coupons composed the bulldozer anthem. Perhaps she too was waiting for the bumper crop showers to subside, another dust mote picker in a long line of lovelorn imports. Yes, I too was stymied by the animal of music and the shadow its breath sent through history. I wanted to tell you about the bank teller and the giant, the red moths hovering above their heads. I wanted to tell you about the gizmo pit and kinds of sludge are cataloged during my investigation. I wanted to tell you about how the sun dissolved all of this long ago, leaving us in different rooms, registered under different names. And this is the last I'll read from this group. Genghis Chan, Private Eye 6. I'm just another particle cloud gliding across the screen, a swamp chanter doodling on the margins of the abyss. I prefer rat-back flames to diplomatic curls. I'm the owner of one pockmarked tongue. I park it on the hedge between sure bets and bad business. So I'm going to read from a more recent book called Bijou in the Dark. I too also write in series, so I will try and read some. I also got obsessed with the Pantoum, so I don't know why I got obsessed with it. I obviously first read one written by John Ashbery, but then I got obsessed with writing them. Music from childhood. You grew up hearing 2 languages. Neither fits your fits. Your mother informs you moon means window to another world. You begin to hear words mourn the sounds buried inside their mouths. A row of yellow windows and a painting of them. Your mother informs you moon means window to another world. You decide it's better to step back and sit in the shadows. A row of yellow windows and a painting of them. Someone said you can see a blue pagoda or a red rocket ship. You decide it's better to step back and sit in the shadows. Is it because you saw a black asteroid fly past your window? Someone said, you can see a blue pagoda or a red rocket ship. I tried to follow in your footsteps, but they turned to water. Is it because I saw a black asteroid fly past my window? The air hums. A circus performer riding a bicycle towards the ceiling. I tried to follow in your footsteps, but they turned to water. The town has started sinking back into its commercial. The air hums. A circus performer riding a bicycle towards the ceiling. You grew up hearing 2 languages. Neither fits your fits. The town has started sinking back into its commercial. You begin to hear words mourn the sounds buried inside their mouths. Portrait, or is it a portrait? I'm a parasite. I lift off the wings of others. Here's another pantoum. First language lesson. As you may have inferred, kapow is not a spicy chicken dish. Meanwhile, you're an accident waiting to repurpose yourself. Who are you to mix up languages? This is not a smorgasbord. You have to remember you're a cylinder, a form of fodder. Meanwhile, you're an accident waiting to repurpose yourself. Why do you need an expensive phone? It won't help you in the future. You have to remember that you're a cylinder, a form of fodder. Our company motto, other than you, no waste shall go to waste. Why do you need an expensive phone? It won't help you in the future. Have you ever thought of joining the circus? You might find a home there. Our company motto, other than you, no waste shall go to waste. Choosing suitable punishments is an unavoidable necessity. Have you ever thought of joining the circus? You might find a home there. If you're speaking about my place in the universe, that's not right. Choosing suitable punishments is an unavoidable necessity. Hasn't the sky repeatedly proven to be the most excellent manager? If you're speaking about my place in the universe, that's not right. Memories are iridescent insects infiltrating your dreams. Hasn't the sky repeatedly proven to be the most excellent manager? Little sphinxes, I've instructed you to the best of my ability. Memories are iridescent insects infiltrating your dreams. As you may have inferred, kapow was not a spicy chicken dish. Little sphinxes, I've instructed you to the best of my ability. Who are you to mix up languages? This is not a smorgasbord. A dream the senator announced on national television. If you're over 65, you should do us all a favor. You should hurry up and die as cheaply and efficiently as possible. This being America, these are the facts. You're a drag on society, a stick stuck in the wheel of progress. I don't know why we still accord you human status when all you do is take up space and cost us money, like a bawling infant or a surly pet, when you're neither, and you aren't spending or saving enough to justify your pathetic existence, or you're spending it on laxatives because you're full of shit. And already we got enough on our hands, so go on and get out. If you're over 65, you need too much attention, and you've already had enough from us and shouldn't get any more, you whiny bag of flatulence, you slimy patch of expectorant sliding down a dirty wall. If you're over 65, the government is sending you money, wads of money every month, because you didn't earn enough in your lifetime to take care of yourself in your old age. You weren't able to think ahead, which means you're a failure. As worthless as the trash my wife carries to the curb every Wednesday morning, because I'm too busy trying to figure out how to get rid of you, and you, and you, and you. And frankly, not a single one of you is worth dealing with. If you're over 65, why not choose cremation? Step into oncoming traffic or fall off a bridge. Just get on with it. I'm sure there are enough people waiting to picture the little heap you accumulated in your miserable life. You might as well end the pain and start giving everything away now. You won't need it where you're going. If you're over 65, you're breathing my air. It's time you stop, because my family and I need it more than you do. We always did. That was for Paul Ryan, but he didn't accept it when I sent it to him. So then I started another group of poems called Opinion Sonnets. It's based on the fact that pinyin is how Chinese is sounded into English, and I like the kind of sound of that relationship. And in order to write them, it all happened because there was a story about a man in Hong Kong going around with his girlfriend, and she wouldn't stop shopping in a mall, so he jumped off the mall and killed himself. I don't know if it's true or not, but there was a long thread of creepy remarks about it, and I started following them because I think all poets are masochists. I mean, you have to be a poet. Opinion Sonnet 4. Plus, I don't understand their food. Who eats chicken feet and eggs buried in mud is unwholesome. Something dirty slithers along in their uncleanliness. You see, what no one is saying is how many of them like to eat animals that got no eyes, some kind of in-between thing. Plus, what kind of people eat six-legged creatures and dried duck blood? You know there's something not right about putting frogs and grasshoppers together. They aren't friends on earth, so why serve them at the same dinner? And this is after, if you know anything about Mark Wahlberg, you'll know why I wrote this poem. Plus, he grew up in Boston, where I grew up, or around Boston. Opinion Sonnet 8, after Mark Wahlberg. Why bring up that old tirade of slurs when it was just some slop slipping from my swollen, drunken tongue? Me and another life I left behind. Even as the neighborhood's tarnished star, I can still say that I outshine all of you, but I need not recite that story again, as it's already written in the fat of your lives. Haven't I learned to be perfectly polite, a form of manipulation none of you has ever deigned to master? Don't my donations earn me a second chance? Some people deserve even more. Frankly, I'm one of them. Isn't that who he is? That was when he wanted to do the hamburger thing and make more Wahlburgers or something. The idea of having more hamburgers in the world didn't seem to me a noble pursuit. Firefly Promises. Each of us began in mid-sentence, wiring frayed, blue electricity filling the air, motion whispers anyone could see through if they stopped to look. This is the snapshot I see when I close my eyes, faded music, rush of disclosures followed by missives delivered in an electronic suitcase. Walking on either side of the river of self-loathing, learning not to step into it though we slip, and it's unavoidable. Later, learning the names of those missteps so as not to make them again, though often did, as each said to the other in the future imperfect, from across the stream that widens and thins according to a tarot deck whose cards are never seen. Reasons or excuses. Which will we run out of first? Did we know when we started that the river between us and that we drank from it, seeing not our reflection, but of that of someone we didn't wish to resemble, even if we did? Some of this is real, and some of this is oxygen. Details are crumbs and scabs to be picked at, a subsistence diet one could grow fat on. What did you do with the fumes, the fuming, while scampering up the ladders of assuming? What disdain greets you, happy to welcome you home? What question that's already answered shall be asked of you next? Where's the rest of the bruised honey? Whose relic have you become? Why try on what doesn't spare you? What was I just saying or thinking to say to you? The words hesitant, a smokestack unfolding its letters to the sky, which is always hurrying to the bus station full of wickedness and fast food. Am I capable of saying this, or even this, other than in mid-sentence? How shall I continue knowing there's no end in sight? This is not what the river told me would happen. 2. It is said that this is a human space we occupy, but today I'm not so sure. I wonder if we are in it or it is in us, a verb and a noun that have yet to announce their shapes or directions. Are we adrift or simply drifting? Did we know that we would reveal ourselves so quickly? Did we know we would lead each other over valleys of pain because we didn't try to cover them, nor find any reason to call attention to their presence? They weren't monuments after all. Sympathy wasn't what we wanted. That's what everyone asked for, a quick salve to bathe the deep wounds. It was as if all we wanted to do was start at the beginning and talk. Is such a beginning possible? Had we guessed that other sentences would follow the first slow greeting and the unexpected comfort of talking that began filling the air between you and I, between all the pronouns we occupied and abandoned? Had we ever thought that it might be possible to talk about the pronouns we left behind, shed, buried, drove away, got rid of in a hurry, or whisper about the ones we still carried with us? Had we imagined the growing cascades filling missives sent from miles away to someone sitting or driving, moving along a road the other would never see? The only thing that holds us together are the missives we send each other. Some days the words seem even more real than we are. It was as if I had never talked to anyone before, or it was that I had never talked to you before, talked to someone who seemed so open to what I was saying that their words appeared to fly through you. Your answers were not words, at least as I thought I knew them. They plunged into me, and they stayed wherever I looked. I began hearing them playing back. I imagine this is what it must have been like for Odysseus when he had his crew tie him to the mast. Music that not even music could describe. He must have kept hearing their notes long after the island vanished behind the horizon. Was that a crazy smile on his face? 3. You've become a figment of my imagination, telling me that whatever I wish for must remain unspoken. It's true that humans do not live on love alone. Bread and whiskey do not cover the rent. What do we become but scowling vacuum cleaners, trying to clean the mess we've made of our daily existence? The telltale crumbs of pointless loathing are only part of the widening story that no one wants to tell. The rest are gestures, celebrated poems, overactive prurience. I decided it's better if I send a letter than a poem, a dream instead of a fiction, something dropped into the sea. This is by no means a testimony trudging ashore. Not even a poet's ego should be that grandiose. Rather, it's a small corner of the page that I'm trying to take up, a corner of a corner. On it, I've written that one day I'll watch you sleeping in my clothes. I don't know where this thought came from, but I've refused to put it away. This is the last section of this poem. I'm copying down what I'm being told to write. It's not a voice I hear, yours or mine or anyone else's, but the space between words that seems to fill with other words, other indications, hints or hums, a kind of music that words cannot accompany, falling away from their small handles on the world, like leaves on a windy day. I'm copying down what I'm being told to write, but I keep thinking these are my words, not someone else's, that I'm thinking and saying and sending you. And yet it's not you that I'm writing to, is it? It's my idea of you, my dream, illusion, or glimpse, a string of silhouettes. This can only mean that this is my ode to failing to write a poem worthy of your attention. Am I extolling you or extirpating words that are poor exposures of the quandary of pronouns you tell me constitute some of the parameters of your inexhaustible inferno? Is this what it means to fall out of the unauthorized sky? Is this what it means to be a feather borne by the wind or a cloud of thwarted eagerness? What brought us to this ocean of loneliness in which we can hear each other swimming in the distance? So I'm going to read from this new book called Genghis Khan on Drums. The title came to me and I actually hadn't written the poem. And then I thought the title was so ridiculous that I didn't know if I should use it, but then I did. That's the way it goes, right? The first poem I'm going to read just a couple. Darts and Brooms. When I was a child, every story you told began with the same line. One wants to become a squirrel, capable of surviving winter. No one could ever guess what you would say next, which is why we huddled around you each evening and waited for the shadows to walk deeper into the crowded room. 2. All across the countryside, beribboned heirloom bundles of arts and letters began to be stored in broom closets while the brooms were put to better use. According to one of the few surviving chronologies of that turbulent era, this is what happened next. As members of a village or town, for some reason cities didn't count, we had to find a new way to measure distance, to anticipate what provisions were needed to travel from point A to point B. It had to be written in a language that we could all agree on and that not proved elusive. In some parts of the countryside, it was reported that cookies were banned, a bourgeois luxury signaling that the roots of one's thoughts were planted in the leafy pond of idleness. This is how further roadblocks to wholesome advancement were removed. Elsewhere, and this is proven harder to pinpoint, caravans got stuck in time. One day we got news from a city seen on the horizon. Rows of bobbing smiles were erased from the faces of disgraced instructors. The oldest instructors, the ones close to being completely useless as opposed to partially useful, were dressed up as scarecrows and brought out to the fields so that they could become one with nature. So began the all-consuming reclamation project, the great upheaval, where barn saws are trained to peck the eyes of interjectors and those with gleaming with inconsequential infirmities. 3. Your part in this remains a mystery, since you were not a direct participant, at least as far as anyone remembers, or even a line of marks in a list included in a citation. According to a one-eyed witness, there was no moonlight in those years, and butterflies lingered outside the park. One particularly gray Sunday, the body of a battered rabbit was mounted on a stick and placed at the park's entrance as a warning. The meaning of the warning was never agreed upon. This caused waves of consternation to undulate through the gathered clusters, heads bobbing in unison. It's known that there are other situations where it was best to imitate pigeons, but these have not yet been entered into the record. The monkeys were freed from the manacles. No one disputes any of these versions, since they all have a ring of truth to them, however small and dirty. 4. Can anyone prove reliable in this environment? Maybe there is no such thing as an eyewitness. Who sees the lone mosquito in the dark? I was there, but I didn't see anything. I heard your eyelids fluttering. I listened to the sweat rolling off a table, A beast's fur stiffened against the wind. A snake slithered out of a jug stored beneath a sink. The faucet never stopped trying, one pathetic tear at a time. The symbol for love is a skull. It does not have to be grinning. It is not a hollow container where you store your jewelry or an orb to be polished by the bedroom window. You should not have told it your secrets. Those who say poverty finds its own humor are liars, deluded as the mayor on his hands and knees, pretending to eat grass. This is what you never talk about, even though it's written all over your face. Your neighbor was put out to pasture. You looked at four walls and learned to sew and sing. Sometimes you'd get up and dance. For years you took comfort in climbing onto the only table your relatives left behind and pretending that you're looking for the horizon. I'll read a couple more. After I turned 68. After I turned 68, I find distasteful ways to use the words enduring and hopeful. I begin stockpiling my daily doses of radiation in an abandoned dollhouse. I order crystals from mail-order spiritual specialists and bury them in the front yard. I start telling my neighbors that I'm interested in marrying an older mermaid. I ask a coworker if it's unsanitary to sneeze into my unwashed armpits. I confess to the druggist that the condoms are for my besotted dog. I tell the taxi driver that I was lucky to have escaped from the morgue. I shrug my shoulders and pretend that I don't know what you're saying. I ask people if they've seen any strange pedestrians wandering around, dazed. I carry a toy phone under my arm and speak into it whenever I go outside. I once told my psychiatrist that I speak gibberish in 4 different languages. I pretend that I'm a poet interested in discarded library books and obscure rhymes. I always sign the guest book with 3 X's because growing old is pornographic. A case of mistaken identity. Actually, I changed the title this morning. A case of mistaken identity. I told the uniformed kangaroos they had the wrong man, and they agreed to let me go. This kind of thing happens to me often, being mistaken for someone else. The kangaroos, who are notoriously nearsighted, were not sure if they had apprehended the right man, a petty criminal, a poor hapless soul, possibly a dishwasher, or in my case, a white-haired poet known to walk around the city at night in search of the perfect pairing of cupcakes and congee. I told them who I was and what I did, and they believed me because they had never heard such a story before. I wondered what story I would tell the next officers I met. It's best to keep changing your tune when you're in a different circumstance. By the time I climbed the 5 flights to my apartment, I was another person, a decorated infantryman who had come back to the street he grew up on and was shunned by his family and neighbors because the glories of war no longer had the same meaning it once did. After a few months, I moved away and once again changed my name. I lived in a state ending with X and learned to do things with my hands that I did not think was possible. I also learned to fly and went to parties. I stood in the corner and made mental notes starting with emesis and ending with sniverlard. I began telling everyone how I rated his or her sense of humor on a scale of 1 to 10. I made fewer friends. In the meantime, I was run over by a car, a freckled boy on a tricycle, and a pilot who wondered why I was lying in the middle of the runway. I raised dachshunds but did not feed them kitchen scraps, as one future biographer will later claim. Joined to an outmoded battery, I began sparking in the middle of the night until the neighbors decided I should move to another part of town where this kind of behavior was tolerated and even embraced, and I did. This is why I told the police officers they had the wrong man. They were looking for a man who tried to rob an ATM, not a man who thought he should have been born in a much deeper fog. I'll read one more. I watch a lot of movies, and this came out of watching one, which I really recommend, and it doesn't say this in the movie. It's called Hands Across the Table, 1935, with Fred MacMurray and Carole Lombard. 1935, you'll see the most racist imitation of someone Japanese by Fred MacMurray. You could see that the intern camps are already an idea long before they happened. Hotel Jane Alice Peters. That's another poem that I'm working on. Hotel Jane Alice Peters. I like sitting in hotel lobbies that are as big as the apse of a cathedral and strung with Christmas lights. I like it when my posterior sinks into the cushion provided by the hotel management for exactly this encounter between lower extremity and nuanced comfort. I like letting my spine and all the flesh that surrounds it fall back into the carefully rounded, slightly tilting support that is attached to an elevated pairing of horizontal cushions that rest securely on four elegantly turned legs. I like the silver claws that form the chair's feet. I like knowing the architecture of this assembly was constructed with human ease in mind. I like pretending that I belong in a lobby festooned with polished brass fixings reminiscent of another era, or framed by fluted marble columns harkening back to an even earlier era. I like knowing I can travel back in time. This is when I start replaying my favorite interlude, when I begin dreaming of meeting Carole Lombard, who died in a plane crash in Mount Potosi, Nevada, age 33. This happened on January 16th, 1942. Today is January 17th, 2019, more than 75 years later. Is there a hotel in Mount Potosi? Is it named after Lombard, third wife of Clark Gable? I like burrowing inside the extinct topography resurrected by young hotel designers, their manufactured version of our collective longing. I like their efforts to harness the barely controllable desire we have to step away from the time we inhabit into a hologram sector that's not been overrun by apocalyptic data. I like knowing that the scar a car accident left on Lombard's face could not be completely erased, and that we can see its trace on her cheek like a horizon line when the camera moves in close, as in Hands Across the Water, 1935, co-starring the charmless Fred MacMurray. I like knowing she'd not want to simper prettily or scream in terror on the screen. I like knowing that the E was added onto her name by mistake and that she decided to keep it. I like knowing that she took life as it came, even if I'm not of that ilk and do not want to go down that torturous path. Thank you.